1 minute.
Oh, we're live now.
We're live. Good morning, everyone. My name is Don Poppel. I'm the chairman today for the first Zoom meeting of the Halliburton Dysart et al. Committee of Adjustment. We have some housekeeping things that we want to address before we go by the actual agenda. So this is the Committee of Adjustment meeting for June the 15th will now come to order. A notice to all those in attendance that this meeting will be live streamed to YouTube and recorded. Please note that the recording will be linked to the municipal website following the meeting. Our committee today consists of Mr. David Bishop, Mr. Jerry Walker, Mr. John Smith, who's councillor from Ward 4, and Danielle Hicks is our host. She has the power to mute, demute, and all the muting. So it's probably a pretty important job. And Jeff Isles, who is our secretary treasurer, is on file and in his office. This is a public hearing to consider 3 applications for a minor variance of municipality zoning bylaw. It's this committee's responsibility to consider all information received to date regarding the requested variances and to hear and consider any comments or questions provided about these applications. Any variance granted by the committee must meet 4 tests, which are very clearly defined in the Planning Act. The requested variance must be minor in nature, must be desirable for the proper development of the land, must comply with the general intent of the official plan, and comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Please note that if anyone wishes to be notified of a decision, please make a request in writing to the municipality. Does any committee member wish to declare a conflict of interest? I believe, Mr. Walker, you have a conflict with the municipality of Dysart application. So it will be recorded as such. And when that application comes up, you will be removed from the screen. This meeting and future Committee of Adjustment meetings will be hosted via electronic participation format only until the emergency declaration for COVID-19 has been lifted. Any oral or written submissions received in advance of the meeting be verbally read aloud at the time of the application being considered. Information regarding live streaming of the meeting is available on the Municipality of Dysart et al. Website. All persons who have pre-registered have an opportunity to present or ask questions about the proposals. Please direct all your questions and comments to the committee chairman. Once I open the door for public comments, registered attendees that wish to speak and are participating in the Zoom meeting by video will need to click the raise hand button to request to speak. After that, registered applicants participating by phone will be asked if they wish to speak. Each registered person will have up to 5 minutes to provide comment or ask questions. Once finished speaking, the meeting host will mute the microphone. Please state your name and your relation to the application prior to speaking. Now, before we begin the actual application for variance, we have some minor housekeeping things that we want to establish. And I need a mover and a seconder for the minutes to resolve that the minutes of March 11, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Jerry Walker, seconded by David Bishop. All in favor of that? Please hold your hand. In favor? Carried. Thank you. Second thing is we need a motion to adopt that be it resolved that Jeff Isles be appointed as Deputy Secretary Treasurer for the Dysart Committee of Adjustment for the remainder of the year of the committee beginning July 15, 2020. Moved by David Bishop, seconded by John Smith. All in favor of that motion, please hold your hand. Carried. Thank you. We also need a motion to be it resolved Danielle Hicks be appointed as Deputy Treasurer for the Dysart Committee of Adjustment for the remainder of the year committee meeting July 15, 2020. Moved by David Bishop, second by John Smith. All in favor of that motion? Indicating 3+. Thank you. We have to go through the process of determining a chairman for the remainder of the term of starting July 15, 2020. So we're open for nominations, and then Mr. Bishop.
I nominate Don Pobble to be our continuing chairman.
Your seconder, Jerry
I
Walker.
will second that.
Moved by David Bishop. Are there any other nominations? I'll accept the nominee or accept a motion to close the nomination floor. John Smith. Closed by John Smith. All in favor? Please hold your hand. Thank you very much for all your confidence. How it goes. Not particularly an IT tech, but we're gonna, as long as we have Danielle here, we're okay. Okay, so now we will deal with the files that are presenting that we're considering today. There are 3 files, and the first is file D13MV 2020-005 Blair and La Fontaine in the township of Havelock.
I will bring them in there.
So can you tune those people in, Danielle?
They're unmuted and on the screen.
Beg your pardon?
They're unmuted and on the screen.
Okay, so it's Andrew Blair and Rosanna LaFontaine. Is that who we have?
Yes,
Welcome to our meeting.
thank you.
Would you like to make a quick synopsis of what your proposal or what your request is regarding the variance? Either one of you can speak or both of you can speak as you wish, and then we'll open the floor to our committee members for questions.
Okay, we
Floor is
propose,
all yours.
okay, we propose to add a screened-in porch and a garage. We have a diagram that indicates the setbacks. And I guess the one corner of the garage encroaches on the setback from the road. So we've applied for a minor variance to get that accepted. And also, cottage, I guess, was built closer to the water based on the GPS survey. So we've applied for a minor variance to have that accepted. So I think you have all the details. If you have any questions, we're here to answer those.
Okay. We'll open the floor to any committee member who wishes to put a question on the floor to these people. John? Jerry? Go at the same time. John, go first.
Has the shed been removed yet?
No, it hasn't. We have stuff in it, so we were kind of hoping to have the garage built to put the stuff in, but I understand that we'll probably have to move the shed back away from the 100-foot setback, which we will do temporarily until the garage is built.
So that would probably be a condition of allowing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that, John?
Yeah, so you'll remove the shed then is your plan, or move it to an acceptable location?
I was planning to move it to an acceptable location, but if it has to be removed, then I would do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jerry?
That was my question too about the shed, so that was answered. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Bishop?
Does the zoning in that particular area allow the shed to remain as another building if it is moved to an appropriate site?
I believe it is. I don't know.
Do you have any other outbuildings?
We have a woodshed, so the garage and screen and porch would become part of the cottage. I believe we're allowed at least 3 buildings. I thought maybe 4, but I'm not sure.
I think you're okay there. I think it's 2, but I forget what it is exactly. But once your garage won't be considered an outbuilding if it's attached to your house. Right?
Sure.
That is right. So you have 2 other outbuildings is what you're saying if you want to keep it, if you want to keep the.
Yeah, well, we plan to, whatever items are in the shed would now become part of the garage, and we would not need the shed.
Whose hand is it? Go ahead, Jeff.
Just to clarify the zoning for the subject lands does permit 2 accessory buildings plus an additional accessory building under 100 square feet or under 10 square meters, I should say, for a total of 3. So as per the applicants, if they did move it into compliance with the proper setbacks, it would comply with the number of total accessory buildings. And just to follow up on the questions with regards to the removal of the shed or the shed being brought into compliance, staff have recommended a condition that prior to the issuance of a building permit that shed be removed or brought into compliance with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that will be part of the resolution. Any other questions with respect to this file? Dave Bishop?
In regard to this application, if we're going to talk about the approval of it, as long as the conditions set forth and the recommendations, I would be in favor of moving to approving this application.
Is there a seconder for that? Jerry
I'll
Walker?
second it.
Okay, Jeff, you can talk.
And prior to moving forward, staff have received some public comments on the file, and I'm going to take this time now to read out the comments received, as well as the proposed conditions. Notice of the minor variance was circulated to all agencies required by regulation on June 30th, 2020. The required advertisement was also placed in the local newspaper. The following oral and written comments have been received on the file. Staff received an email from Mr. Ron Ciatola, who is the adjacent neighboring property to the south of the subject land. Mr. Ciatola has concerns whether the proposed building addition will impact the drainage on the applicant's property. There is a culvert underneath the road near the applicant's entrance, which currently directs the drainage between the applicant and Mr. Ciatola's property. Mr. Ciatola is asking how the drainage will be directed during the construction of the addition. Staff also received an email from Allison Johnson from the Paddy's Bay Road Association, including Corrine and Everett Johnsons, who arranged repairs for the Road Association, and Jim Reeve, who is the contact for annual road insurance for the association. They don't have concerns from a road maintenance perspective. However, Corrine and Everett Johnson have noted concerns about the drainage of water from the culvert if the development is to proceed. I'm going to read out the conditions right now, the proposed conditions. Should the committee decide to grant the requested variances, the following conditions may be appropriate. Condition number 1, these variances apply to a seasonal dwelling as shown on the property sketch A and property sketch B dated May 12, 2020 and attached to the decision. Any encroachment beyond the requested variances will require a further minor variance. Condition number 2, the County of Haliburton Shoreline Tree Preservation Bylaw applies. The injury or destruction of trees within 30 meters of the high water mark is not permitted. The exemptions noted in section 3 of that bylaw apply. Furthermore, additional native shoreline planting is encouraged to screen the buildings, naturalize the shoreline, and address environmental concerns. Condition number 3, during construction, proper site preparation and construction methods are to be used to prevent sedimentation of the adjacent lake. Specifically, sediment fencing is to be installed down gradient from the construction site. Condition number 4, during construction, proper site preparation and construction methods are to be used to prevent water drainage or flooding on the adjacent properties. Condition number 5, the minor variance to the water setback applies to the seasonal dwelling constructed by way of building permit P10 BP 2009-117. All future construction must comply with the required water setback. Condition number 6, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the shed located near the shoreline is to be removed or brought into compliance with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. Condition number 7, prior to the pouring of the footings for the addition, the applicant must supply confirmation from an Ontario land surveyor that the seasonal dwelling complies with the required water setback. Condition number 8, prior to the pouring of the footings, the applicant must also supply confirmation from an Ontario land surveyor that the seasonal dwelling complies with the street setback and is also not located on the right-of-way identified as parts 4 to 6 on plan 19R 7597. Thank you, Chair. That is all the proposed conditions.
Any questions on any of that? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any comment with regard to the concern expressed about drainage in the area?
Well,
I'm not aware of any, but can you speak to that, Jeff?
With regards to the concerns pertaining to drainage, staff have proposed a condition that during construction, proper site preparation and methods are to be used to prevent water drainage and flooding on adjacent properties.
So just I wanted just to be certain that from your perspective, Jeff, that will address the concern that's been expressed by one of the neighbors in his written submission.
I believe it will. As Mr. Ciatola said, right now the drainage or the water is directed down between the applicants and his property. And this requires him to prevent any drainage or flooding on his property.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions with respect to this application? Been moved and seconded. We'll call for the vote, please. Please raise your hand in favor, or 1, 2, 3 in favor. It means it's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're going to do something different. We normally don't complete the application. We do them all at the end, but we're going to do each one as we're doing it. So please bear with me as we read as I read with this file. Moved and seconded, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2020-005 be recorded as follows. Decreased provision of section 5.2 to permit a seasonal dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 28 meters as opposed to required minimum of 30 meters. Granted. Carried. Please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. It's carried. Granted. And number 2 is a variance provision in section 3.30 permitted seasonal dwelling to have a minimum street setback of 6 meters as opposed to required minimum of 7.5 meters is granted. Please indicate by raising your hand. Thank you very much. There is a waiting period, Mr. Blair, of 20 days before you can begin any construction or anything like that. So please comply with that. Pardon me?
Can we apply for a building
You can
permit?
apply for the permit. You can't actually begin construction or anything.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
Good. Thank you very much. So we'll move to application number 2.
Perfect.
And we're dealing with Paul and Angela Simcox.
1 second.
We've still got Mr. Blair and Pat Fontaine.
I don't know.
Okay. Is this Angela?
So we have Helena and Marie from the Marie Foyer planning, as well as Paul Simcox. He's one of the owners.
So who is going to speak to the application?
I, Helena Kramer, will speak to the application, sir.
Thank you. If you would like to go ahead, and I must congratulate you on your report. It was very thorough. And I read myself to sleep the other night with it.
Wonderful.
It is very thorough, and I think we're very much looking forward to dealing with your application. So if you'd like to just give a quick synopsis for the committee, then we'll carry on from there.
Okay, excellent. Actually, I've prepared a quick presentation for you, and I'm not sure who's doing the screen sharing, if it's Jeff or Tammy or Danielle, but I was hoping you could please screen share the submission that we provided. And the materials for presentation begin on page 4 of that submission package. So I'll just start off by thanking you all for participating in this electronic meeting, and I'd also like to thank staff for working with us on this application. I trust you all had the opportunity to review the staff report and the requested minor variances, but to provide you with a refresher, an application was made by Marie Poirier Planning and Associates Incorporated on behalf of Paul and Angela Simcox, owners of the subject property at 1315 Piccadilly Lane on Redstone Lake. The application is requesting a minor variance to permit a 20 centimeter or 8-inch reduction to the shoreline setback for an existing sunroom and deck in order to permit a reconfiguration of these structures. This drawing on the 4th page of the submission package shows the existing sunroom and deck in brown. There it is. And the proposed structures are outlined by the solid green line. The yellow arrows show the distance we're requesting a variance for, which is 8 inches more than the structures as they currently exist. So this presentation will provide you with justification so you can apply the tests pursuant to Section 45 of the Planning Act for the 2 areas that are proposed to extend a further 8 inches into the shoreline yard. I would like to provide justification for our opinion. The plans for the existing dwelling, deck, and sunroom were approved by the municipality in June of 1996 by building permit number 1996-078. Please see the elevation rendering of the structure, which is also on file at the municipal office. It's just on the following page there. Could you please scroll to the next page? Thank you. So the yellow highlighted areas are the sunroom and the green areas are the deck, which are the subject of this application. Now I'll clarify at this point that these highlighted areas are not the areas that we're requesting variances for, but they're the structures as they currently exist and which have been approved by the building permit in 1996. So the final inspection was conducted in November of 2005 and occupancy granted. It can be assumed that at the time the structures complied with the required setback in the zoning bylaw, since the CBO could not have issued a permit if they had not, nor would final occupancy have been granted. If the structure did not in fact comply with the bylaw at the time the permit was applied for, or at the time that the inspections were conducted, it was the responsibility of the municipality to identify any deficiencies at that point. A recent survey was undertaken by the current owners, which revealed the existing sunroom is now 17.9 meters from the high water mark and the deck 14.7 meters from the high water mark, despite compliance with the required 20 meter and 17 meter setbacks at the time the building permit and final occupancy were issued. Based on the figure provided in the recent survey, we understand that staff are proposing to recognize the change in setback through approval of this minor variance application and have no concern with this approach. However, the variances we are seeking in this application are only for 8 inches over the existing setback of each structure. So if you could please see the excerpt from the survey with the requested variances from their existing locations, identified again with yellow arrows on the following page there. The chart at the bottom of this page summarizes the existing and proposed setback of each structure. It is worth noting that the requested 8-inch extension into the setback does not extend the entire width of each structure, only the southeast corner of each structure at a maximum width of 1 meter. Respectfully, if I may put it into perspective, the resulting increase in area would allow space for 1 additional tomato plant, or about 2.2 square feet. In anticipation of your questions, I'd like to note there are reasons why the setback could be reduced over the course of approximately 20 years. A change in surveyors' technology and measuring techniques, natural erosion of the shoreline, controlled and/or varying water levels, or inaccurate measuring by the surveyor or inspector. Regardless of the reason, the existing setbacks should be recognized as legal through this process, and we concur with the staff approach in this regard. In terms of a response to staff concerns outlined in the report, I note the following. With respect to the prescribed setbacks and staff members' concerns stated in section 3 or the background of the staff report, that the proposed sunroom and deck enlargement do not strictly adhere to the prescribed 20-meter setback for structures, and therefore do not conform to official plan policy 5.1.2, I would like to draw committee members' attention to policy 1.6.1 in the official plan pertaining to quantities listed in the plan. And I quote, "It is intended that all figures and quantities in this plan will be considered as approximate and not absolute. An amendment to this plan will not be required to permit any minor variation from any of these figures or quantities." End quote. The official plan contemplates that from time to time, minor variances to figures or quantities in the official plan are in fact appropriate. This policy section permits the flexible application of all official plan policies through the minor variance process, which is what is being proposed here. The general intent of the municipality of Dysart et al. Official plan, which is also echoed in the staff report, is to protect and maintain the integrity of the shoreline. In terms of how the subject property and proposed development do in fact maintain the general intent of the official plan, we offer the following. The shoreline of the subject property is in its natural state with substantial vegetation, particularly between the proposed sunroom and deck extensions and the shore. Please see the 2 photos of the cottage taken from the water on the 2 following pages. The proposed sunroom and deck enlargements do not require any vegetation removal. This point also addresses staff concerns respecting section 2.2.1 of the official plan, respecting the preservation of the natural shoreline, which the proposed fulfills. Please see the photo with the proposed outline of the sunroom drawn in green. You'll notice it incorporates a reduction in the extent of the deck on this side for the purpose of preserving the mature tree that is growing at the corner of the deck and thereby further maintaining the general intent of the official plan. So you can see the mature tree there at the corner of the deck. The proposed variances will not result in an increase in height. The proposed variances do not compromise the visual aesthetics of the natural shoreline of the property. Please see the last photo. The proposed variances will enhance the enjoyability of the property for the owners and increase the value of the property. The proposed variances meet all other bylaw requirements. And for all the reasons stated above, this application maintains the general intent of the bylaw and official plan and is desirable and appropriate for the use of the lands and property. So we respectfully submit that the minor variances required to permit the proposed 8-inch extension to the sunroom and deck do maintain the general intent of the municipality's official plan and zoning bylaw. And I further emphasize that maintaining the general intent of the official plan and zoning bylaw are the tests for a minor variance, not conformity with these documents. We further submit that the requested variance to reduce the required water setback for the deck and sunroom are desirable and appropriate for the subject property, and respectfully request that committee grant these variances. Myself, Marie, and Mr. Simcox are present to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much for listening to this presentation.
Thank you. Can we switch the screen so that we, okay. Jeff, would you care to comment on any of these remarks?
Sorry, Chair, were you directing that question to me?
Yes.
Thank you.
I need your help anyway, because you've given me a blank sheet of paper with respect to what we're allowing here. So I need the precise measurements on this piece of paper here.
Okay, well, the variance is being requested. If you have the planning report in front of you, the applicants have provided a table which clearly outlines what is permitted by the bylaw. what is existing with regards to the deck and the seasonal dwelling, what is proposed for the deck and the seasonal dwelling. So right now, the seasonal dwelling, or specifically one corner of the sunroom, is located 17.9 meters from the high water mark. The bylaw requires that it's to be 20 meters from the high water mark. They are proposing, they're requesting that that location be legalized, given that the municipality provided and approved a building permit in that location. They are also requesting that a 20 centimeter further encroachment into that setback by way of an addition to the sunroom. With regards to the deck, the bylaw permits decks attached to main dwellings to extend 3 meters into a water setback. Given that the water setback for the property is currently 20 meters, the required setback is 17 meters. The existing setback of the deck is 14.7 meters. And again, they're requesting to legalize the deck in that location as it was shown on the building permit approved by the municipality. And they are further requesting a 20 centimeter encroachment into that setback for 14.5 meters, or an encroachment of 3.2 meters. Does that clarify that for you, Mr. Chair?
It does, except for the fact that we don't have any paperwork on the 20 centimeter variance.
Well, so I will explain that. So what we've done is we've circulated it based on the existing requirements of the zoning bylaw. So as I mentioned, the required setbacks right now are 20 meters and for the seasonal dwelling, and 3 meter encroachment for the existing deck. So when we circulated that the deck, that the sunroom had to comply with the 20 meter setback. We circulated it at the full extent so that of what the applicants are requesting, which would be 17.7 meter water setback as opposed to the required 20 meters. With regards to the deck, we are considering that the existing required setback is 17 meters. Therefore, the deck at 14.5 meters, which is being proposed, actually encroaches an existing 5.5 meters into the water setback as opposed to the required 3 meters. If the committee decides to grant specific variances as outlined in the table provided by the applicants, then those numbers will be adjusted, which is why we've left those values blank for you. So what the committee has, I guess, a few questions in front of them. A, do they wish to legalize the existing dwelling? B, do they wish to grant a variance to allow that dwelling to further encroach by 20 centimeters into the water setback? C, do they wish to legalize the location of the existing deck? And D, do they wish to grant a variance to permit that deck or expansion of the deck to further encroach 20 centimeters into the water setback?
Okay, David?
Yes, I want to address this to the applicant's agent. A question I have in terms of her presentation, are you relying that this property and the buildings on it do have legal non-conforming position status and therefore just going for a minor variance on the new construction? Or are you asking for a minor variance for the whole thing? I think you're on the horns of a dilemma in that regard, because if you're relying on this building to have legal non-conforming status, then the application should be worded in a different fashion. I don't know if you've got case law that says that just because it was approved of by the township, that gives it a legal non-conforming status. So are we looking for a minor variance to correct the whole thing, or just for your new construction and this 20 centimeters?
Okay, so what town planning staff, municipal planning staff have brought forward is in fact to recognize the existing setbacks. So we have no issue with doing that, with recognizing the existing setbacks and then requesting the additional 20 centimeters or 8-inch reduction in setbacks on top of that.
I think the short answer to that is, Committee Member Bishop, yes, we're looking to recognize everything that's there and an additional 8 inches. I think what we were trying to do was just to give you perspective of this. We wanted to bring to your attention this was existing. I didn't want you to think that we were asking for a minor variance for a new build to that extent.
So,
Your question?
so
Dave?
the application, excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So the application is a minor variance really for the whole thing that we're talking about, what's existing and the proposed change of the 20 centimeter.
We
Is that
agree.
correct?
That's correct. We agree with staff. We think that has to be done.
Any other questions? Councillor Smith?
Thank you. This is a difficult situation. And I'm just looking for confirmation of something here first. As I understand, similar to my own building over on Kinesis, in this case, back in the late 90s, the property owner who was building the original cottage would have had to get an Ontario land surveyor come in and document a location that was 66 feet, 20 meters from the high water mark, and designate that as the point that the building could be closest to the lake. Is that correct, Jeff?
Through you, Chair. At the time this building was constructed, the municipality did not require surveys for construction or for variances. Since that time, or since this building's been constructed, the municipality has implemented policies and procedures to ensure buildings being constructed do comply with their setbacks, and even through the minor variance, through conditions, we ensure that any variances granted do comply with those setbacks. But just to clarify, at the time that this building was constructed by permit in 1999, we did not require surveys.
Okay, thank you. So at that time, our building department then was really relying upon the good judgment of the owners in terms of assuring. And then, we didn't hire a surveyor. Our building staff would have come out and looked at it and said, yeah, that looks like it's probably about 20 meters. Is that sort of the process that would have been in place at that time?
That is my understanding, correct. They relied on the site plan provided and based it on that. Yes.
Okay. So it's hard to argue against agreeing that hey, nobody should have to tear down the building or whatever. It ought to be granted legal non-compliant status. That's a fair and reasonable conclusion. The only question then becomes: do we really allow an additional encroachment on that 20-meter buffer? Is that really what we're wrestling with here?
I'd say it is, but it's a pretty small encroachment that they're asking for at the same time. So I think what has to happen here, I agree with you. You're not going to tell these people to tear their building down and move it back, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
So at the same time, wouldn't it make sense to allow them to do the deck the way they want it? They've gone to quite a bit of expense for this whole transaction. So it seems to me that they're not, this is a fairly large piece of property, and they're not really taking any vegetation out to do what they want to do. It's very, we got a hand raise. Anyway, I'll get that.
Yeah, and so, Mr. Chair, just to respond to that was my point, that although we're talking about distances that appear to be measured in meters, 14 versus 17 and 17 versus 20 and so forth. We're really talking about a distance of about 20 centimeters is the matter that's really up for debate here today.
I agree. And Marie?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. If I can put it into perspective for you, the 8 inches is about the length of the pencil or the pen that you have in your hand. And it's only for the corner of the deck. It's not for the full extent of the deck. It's not for the full extent of the sunroom. It's just one corner. And in terms of vegetation, Mr. Simcox is doing this to save a tree rather than take a tree down. So he's doing everything he can to maintain vegetation. There'll be none removed. And in our opinion, there will be no impact from this small 8-inch encroachment at the corner of the deck and sunroom. Thank you.
My pen came from the Bank of Montreal, and I know they're fairly cheap, so it's only about 4 inches long. Or whatever it is, so. Do we have other questions? Dave, and then Jerry.
I want to make sure that we're not confused here. The applicant, I don't see how you can claim that the building has legal non-complying status. So if we're going to do anything positive for this applicant, the application should be for recognizing as a minor variance the position of the existing building. The applicant and her agent is making an error in regard to this 8-inch extension by virtue of the fact that she even quoted under the official plan documents and statements that these things are approximate. And if you put a corner of this in 8 inches, it ain't gonna fall, it's not gonna fail. So the matter has to be in my submission that we have to approve, if this is gonna go ahead, of the existing building on a minor variance application. And then you go ahead with the extensions that are gonna happen at this point in time.
Okay. Jerry?
I just wanted to bring up about the, my review of the whole application seems to be in a very minor situation, which meets with our outlay of requirements. So with that being said, I would make a motion that we accept this and approve this application.
David?
Is the application, sorry, Mr. Chair,
Great.
may I go ahead?
Yes.
So is it through, ask Jeff if the application is a minor variance recognizing the existing and for the additional 20 centimeters?
Through you, Chair.
Respond to that, Jeff.
The way that we circulated the variance encompasses both requests. So we circulated it on the distance so that the committee had the opportunity to legalize the existing development as well as approve the requested encroachment if you so choose.
I understand that, but we're not, there's no mention in the paperwork I have of the 8 inches required to finish this thing off.
And I apologize for that, Mr. Chair. We left those values blank on purpose in the decision, just depending on what the committee's decision would be today. So if the committee decides to grant all variances being requested, that includes legalizing the existing development and the request for further encroachment. The setback for the dwelling will be 17.7 meters as opposed to the required 20 meters. And
the other is 14.5.
It actually, the way it reads is it reads encroaching into the setback. So it would be 3.2 meters as opposed to the required 3.
3.2 meters.
And before I go further, Mr. Chair, I just want to let you know that I still would like to read out the notice and circulation requirements and proposed conditions with regards to the minor variance.
Go ahead with that.
All right.
And then,
Notice of the minor variance was circulated to all persons. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, did you have something?
I think you finish your part and then we'll deal with Mr. Bishop.
Okay, thank you. Notice of the minor variance was circulated to all persons and agencies required by regulation on June 30th, and the required advertisement was also placed in the local newspaper. No oral or written comments have been received as of the date of today. With regards to proposed conditions, should the committee decide to grant the requested variances, condition 1, the variances apply to a seasonal dwelling and attached deck as shown on the property sketch dated April 24th, 2020, and attached to the decision. Any encroachment beyond the variances granted herein will require a further application for a minor variance. Condition 2, the County of Haliburton Shoreline Tree Preservation Bylaw applies. The injuring or destruction of trees within 30 meters of the high water mark is not permitted. The exemptions noted in section 3 of that bylaw apply. Furthermore, additional native shoreline planting is encouraged to screen the buildings, naturalize the shoreline, and address environmental concerns. Condition number 3, during construction, proper site preparation and construction methods are to be used to prevent sedimentation of the adjacent lake. Sediment fencing is to be installed down gradient from the construction site, and the site is to be properly stabilized immediately following construction to prevent erosion and sedimentation. Condition number 4, prior to the pouring of the footings for the addition, the applicants must supply confirmation from an Ontario land surveyor that the seasonal dwelling and deck comply with the required water setback and encroachment into the water setback. And lastly, condition number 5, the applicant agrees to implement and or maintain a 3-meter planting strip to screen the deck and dwelling and from view from the shoreline. Do you have any questions with regards to the proposed conditions?
Mr. Bishop.
Yes, Mr. Chair, some of the photographs that we received yesterday, I see a view from the lake towards the cottage site and the dock facility that's there, but there's a platform with a railing around it. Do we have any idea what size that platform is? Because it certainly looks like it'd be within the shore water setback.
Helena or Marie, could you comment on that?
I would just clarify that that structure isn't subject to this application. Through the notes that I have in the survey provided.
If Mr. Simcox is on the line, perhaps he could chime in on this. I'm not familiar with what you're asking.
Fair enough.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Hi, David. It's Paul. How are
Go
you?
ahead. Fine, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Is this the structure by the water that's green?
Yes, it's a structure just off the water on some rock ledge, and it's got steps leading up to it and a railing around it, and it's got some cribbing structure underneath it. I don't know what its square footage would be.
That's a approximate 10 by 10 structure the prior owner built.
So you would confirm that it's under 108 square feet?
Definitely, and it's in pretty poor condition.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions with respect to the application? Yeah.
I just wanted to further comment with regards to the deck located near the shoreline. During staff's review, we did scale that structure, and it appeared to be about 8 by 12 or 96 square feet. And during our review, we did not have any concerns with the location of that building or that structure, sorry.
Fair enough. Any other questions with respect to the application? So you're going to have to help me out here. Then if I go by your paperwork, Jeff, we're going to permit this seasonal dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 17.7 meters. as opposed to required 20? Is that correct?
And I will defer the decision to you, but yes, if the committee is looking to grant the requested variances to legalize and permit the encroachment, it is 17.7 meters.
I think we want to package the whole thing up if we're going to do anything. There's no sense in doing part of it and say, well, yeah, well, we forgot this or we forgot that. I think that these people have been fairly straightforward. So if we allow the seasonal dwelling to have a 17.7 meter setback, does that fix that problem? I believe it does, but is that correct? Are you hearing me, Jeff?
I do hear you. Sorry, Mr. Chair. 17.7 meters would, if the committee were to grant that, would satisfy the applicant's request. Yes.
And the deck extends 3.2 meters into the setback, correct?
Correct, and that is contingent upon the committee granting that water setback variance at 17.7 meters from the high water mark. If the committee does grant that water setback, then it's 3.2 meters, yes.
Alina, you wish to speak?
So the resulting setback just to clarify, Mr. Chair, the resulting setback for the dwelling from the high water mark would be 17.7 meters, and the resulting setback for the southeast corner of the deck from the high water mark would be 14.5 meters. Thank you.
That's correct.
14.5 meters. That's what I had down before.
But just to clarify, Mr. Chair, the way our bylaw reads is that a deck can extend 3 meters into a setback. So Helena is correct that resulting setback for the deck would be 14.5 meters. But the way that the decision would have to read is that it's going to be permitted to encroach 3.2 meters into that setback.
Are you okay with that, Helena?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, we got that straight. Is anyone prepared to make a motion on this particular file?
I did make a motion, I think, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker, very good. I forgot that. I'll prepare the document here right now. Is there a seconder for it? David Bishop. Are we all in favor of that? Please raise your hands. Okay. With respect to the variance requested by Paul and Angelina Simcox, a decreased provisions of section 5.2 to permit a seasonal dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 17.7 meters as opposed to required minimum of 20 meters is granted. That's carried. Please indicate for the passage of hands. And B part, increased provision of section 3.7 to permit an attached deck to extend 3.2 meters into the water setback as opposed to the required 3 meters. Granted. Both those are carried, and you're good to go. Any construction, there's a waiting period. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Does anyone have any other comments with respect to the application?
Just our thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is municipality of Dysart. How do we have a counselor on our committee from the municipality of Dysart, and we're going to have to recognize some kind of a variance for them?
We can turn down the request and see how long it takes council to overrule us.
Jerry's declared on this, so we could take him out of the picture.
I am going to.
You're good. You're going to vote to evaporate, Gerald.
And I'm bringing in Patrick Kennedy to speak on part of the application.
Mr. Kennedy, are you on there? You can fill in the notes. Mr. Kennedy, welcome to this meeting.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, glad to be here. It was an interesting couple of files.
Sorry you didn't get to make the trip down, but anyway, we're pleased that you would talk to us about this application.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity, and to the board, the chair, and the committee. Municipality, as you know, is moving forward with the partnership with the Rotary Club of Halliburton of the building of a new visitor and center and welcome and washrooms. The desire is to have it sit back against that bank as much as possible in order to minimize the roof line view from the upper street to the lake. And in doing that, we have found that we're in a minor encroachment area. So the Director of Public Works has no issues with the proposed location, and open to any questions, I guess, at this point. Thank you.
Do we have any questions with respect to this industrious individual we're dealing with? Bishop?
Well, I really don't have any questions in regard to it, Mr. Chair, but in regard to applying our 4 tests on the granting of a minor variance, one of the overwhelming aspects that we have to keep in mind is the necessity for the desirability of a variance in order to ensure that something is provided for the public in this regard. That's a need that's been outstanding for many, many years. That notwithstanding that we do have a requirement of coming into lesser setbacks, encroaching into them, I think that the municipal and public need substantially overrides that.
Anyone else wish to speak? Mr. Isles, would you speak to this program, please? Be awful careful who you know. Make sure you know who you work for.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just want to quickly outline the notice and circulation process. And we did receive a public comment, couple public comments on this file. First, notice of the minor variance was circulated to all persons and agencies required on June 30th, 2020, and the required advertisement was placed in the local newspaper. We did, as I mentioned, receive 2 oral and written comments. The first was a submission from Rob Camelon, who's the Director of Public Works for the municipality of Dysart et al. He has noted that the proposed setback will not impede maintenance activities for York Street. The second comment was a general comment with concerns with regards to loss of parking spots. I should note that staff have reviewed the parking spaces and note that there is sufficient parking spaces within the village and additional parking spaces created recently outside the municipal office here. And staff do agree with committee member Bishop's comment that the need for washrooms within the village has been outlined as a necessity and a priority by council for a long time. With regards to conditions, I'm not going to read them all out. It's the standard 3 conditions, which I've read out for the previous two applications. The first being that the variance applies to the building as shown on the property sketch. The second being that the County of Halliburton Shoreline Tree Preservation Bylaw applies. And then the last condition being that during construction, proper site preparation and construction methods be used, specifically that sediment fencing be used to down gradient just to protect the lake.
Mr. Deputy Reeve, I assume since we made those rules that you'll be able to live by them?
Yes.
Yes. If anyone else wishes to speak, hold your hand up if you want to talk. Would someone make a motion with respect to the proposal? Mr. Bishop? Moved by David.
Mr. Chairman, I propose that we approve this application subject to the conditions as recommended by the municipality's planning staff.
Mr. Smith, would you care to second this?
Happy to second it.
Okay. It's being resolved, the committee's decision with respect to file D13 NV 2020-20-008 be recorded as follows. A decreased provision of section 10.2 to bid an accessory building of a minimum rear lot line setback of 3.5 meters as opposed to the required minimum of 7.5 meters. Carrie, just I look for two hands. Thank you. And variance permit an accessory building to have a minimum street back of 12.5 meters as opposed to the required setback of 17.5 meters. Gary? Very good. Any other questions? Someone move that we declare the meeting adjourned. Oh, sorry, Jeff has something first, do you?
Before we move on to the final resolution, can we bring committee member Walker back into the meeting?
Oh, okay. You want to grab him?
Got it.
Yeah, we'll get him. He's coming back. You're back in? Okay. You're
I'm
pointing.
here.
Okay, you're okay. You don't have any, you didn't want to speak to this anyway, Gerald.
No,
No, okay. Someone move that we adjourn the meeting?
I'll adjourn. I'll make that motion.
Would there be a seconder for that? Mr. Bishop? Be adjourned at high noon. Enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much for participating in this. Wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. Actually, the people aren't even yelling at us because they aren't sitting out here anymore. So this mute button is a wonderful thing. Thank you very much. We're going to.
Thanks, Mr.
We'll
Chair.
all be demuted here in about 5 seconds. Enjoy your day. Noon.